Fox 2 presents Hancock and Kelly.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to Hancock and Kelly on Fox 2, where we take on the top issues of the week. On the right, John Hancock.
Good morning.
On the left is Michael Kelly.
Good morning.
And I'm Andy Banker, right smack dab in the middle. On the agenda, the loss of a towering figure in St. Louis, former Congressman Bill Clay. From civil rights to workers' rights, he changed the future of politics in the city, the state, and the nation. The fiasco at St. Louis Lambert International Airport. Passengers line up for the equivalent of city blocks outside the terminal, waiting in line. What kind of message does that send about St. Louis being ready for business? The president may not like it, but his ties to sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein won't go away. Now a Trump ally from Missouri says it's time to release everything. And our quote of the week is from a letter to Congress. The Illinois Attorney General and other Democrats call for ICE agents to be demasked. Also, Republicans chop the budgets of what they say are liberally biased public broadcasting networks. And this one, is it really the case in St. Louis, where Channel 9 and NPR will be taking big hits from those cuts? We begin with the State Control Show now playing in St. Louis. The governor-appointed board that will run the city police department holds its first meeting this past week. The city's progressive Democrat mayor, Kara Spencer, has an automatic seat with the 5 other members appointed by the conservative Republican governor, Mike Kehoe. One of the board's first moves, awarding a $6 million contract for 800 police body cams and 275 in-car cameras. That's a 3-year extension of the contract that just expired. The real story continues to be potential conflicts for board members. The board elected restaurateur Chris Saraceno as its president. He owns a private security company that hires police officers for part-time work when they're off duty. Non-voting board member, car dealer Don Brown, does millions of dollars worth of business with the city and the police department every year. State lawmakers, including a number of Democrats, moved for state control, with laws often not being enforced in the city and the city's police force shrinking drastically under previous mayors. John, how are things supposed to be better under this setup?
Well, you're going to have a board. You do have a board in place now that supports police officers, and that's a good thing. They need to add to the number of police officers, specifically the number of police officers who are on patrol, and they need to elevate. I think the entertainment district that the governor signed a week or two ago will allow more of this private policing, where you hire the off-duty police officers. Just having that presence, I think, is going to make a big difference in fighting the crime in the business district of the city, which is where the commerce has to take place.
What about these conflicts or potential conflicts? And then you have this new board, and it's almost all white in a city that's not all white.
Well, conflicts are fair questions, and and that they deserve to be answered, and I think they have. I know all of those folks on that board. They are all good, decent people who are trying to work hard to better St. Louis. I think the fact that we've started a public process now where their meetings are going to be public, they're being completely transparent, is a huge step in the right direction. And I echo what John says, which is the real trouble is ahead. We need to find more officers, find a way to pay them, and make this city safe again.
Now, Don Brown, the governor, points out he's a car dealer. He's not
a non-voting
member. He's the non-voting member. There's one non-voting member. But if he's a non-voting member and it's not a big deal, why pick a guy that does millions of dollars of business with this?
Because he cares very deeply about policing, and he's got a long track record. He supports the police department. He supports the police foundation. Don Brown's a perfectly good voice to have in that conversation.
And the other person that was pointed out with the Saracenos, with the Ochone Bartolinos and Chris's Pancake House, these
committed
are people
to
who
St.
are
Louis.
heavily invested in St. Louis.
Right.
Everything they're doing is trying to make their neighborhoods safe so that more people want to come and utilize their restaurants. That's the mentality we need.
And both of you say give them a little line here. They're just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, they've had, one meeting so far. The test is going to be if they're able to put officers on the streets. That's what I'm looking for.
St. Louis Lambert International Airport was a traveler's nightmare last weekend, stretching into the early part of the week. The airport reports a record number of passengers screened, more than 25,000 last Sunday alone, overrunning the system in Terminal 2. It was departure day for thousands of delegates from the Seventh-day Adventist Conference at America Center. The check-in line stretched out the terminal for the equivalent of several city blocks. There was big trouble for everyone trying to fly out of the terminal, not just the convention goers, people missing flights because of the lines, even though they showed up early. The airport issued an apology. Is that enough, Michael Kelly? City officials, airport officials knew this was coming. The airlines too.
Yeah, no, this is a complete failure, a structural and a controllable failure. You know, the thing about the airport is you don't get to show up unless you have a ticket. And in many instances, you let people know months in advance, this is the day I'm going to come to your airport. They knew this was going to be the busiest day, and this is what happens. Boy, we are not ready for prime time. You know, people who came and spent 7-10 days, spent money, invested in our town, may have had a positive experience, left with an 8-hour delay that was simply inexcusable, not for something that happened nationally. Somebody didn't plan properly.
Does this get around? Will this scare off business in the future?
I think that's the biggest concern. These folks aren't coming back. And every one of them is going to some place in the country and telling their neighbors that, guess what happened to me at the St. Louis airport? It's not good. It's not good.
Governor Kehoe hosted U.S. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins at St. Louis County Tuesday to cut a ribbon at a new USDA food safety lab in Normandy, not far from the UMSL campus.
Here we go.
It's a new 70,000 square foot laboratory that will analyze samples for foodborne pathogens and chemical residues to prevent things like Listeria outbreaks and improve the safety of meat, poultry, and eggs. The lab has about 75 workers. It's one of only 3 in the country. A couple of things here, John. The focus on food safety for the Trump administration. And also, do you remember a more high-profile cabinet down the line? It seems like more Americans know more of these people, the bigwigs of the Trump administration.
I mean, they send them out there, and they're on every media outlet imaginable, and so yeah, they do have a high profile. And you know, you want the food to be safe out there, Andy. You don't want to get Listeria, whatever that is. And so I'm glad they're building this thing.
And people know the Interior Secretary, right? Doug Burgum. He was just out at Alcatraz. You know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, well,
It's not just the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, you know.
Donald Trump is a marketing master for all of his faults. There's no doubt about that. And he understands today's society and how you communicate. He has employed those folks that are his secretaries as foot soldiers to do that. They're putting a spotlight on the administration. I don't think I would mistake the fact that the secretaries are showing up, that they're truly the decision makers. This is Donald Trump's show, and they're playing a role in it. It's being done by intention.
It's good for St. Louis to have this lab. I think a lot of people, until the new one was built, didn't even know the old one was there.
I didn't know.
I had no clue it was there. I'm grateful it is.
You want to have safe food, though.
Yes.
It's important.
Now to the President Trump Jeffrey Epstein saga. The president has tried to downplay his past dealings of 15, 20 years ago or more connected to the convicted sex trafficker, Epstein. However, key allies are not going along, including a senator from Missouri. First up, you'll hear from Donald Trump during the presidential campaign saying that he would release Justice Department files on Epstein, and then his change of tune from just this past week.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff.
He's dead, he's gone, and all it is the Republicans, certain Republicans got duped by the Democrats, and they're following a Democrat playbook.
Well, I think what it needs is full transparency. I mean, I think they ought to release all of the records. I don't know why we would hold anything back. I mean, when I say we, I mean the prosecutors. I mean, the Department of Justice, I think, ought to release all of the records. If they need somebody to do an independent review of those, then that's fine by me. I mean, maybe that is necessary. I think at a minimum, though, let's release all the records. I don't understand all of a sudden the reticence to release what prosecutors have, and they have a lot.
That from the former Missouri Attorney General turned Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. A Wall Street Journal report includes an alleged note from Mr. Trump to Epstein for Epstein's 50th birthday party in 2003 with Mr. Trump's signature and a drawing of a woman's breast saying, "Happy birthday, may every day be another wonderful secret." The president denies penning that note. His vice president calls it BS, only the vice president did not use the abbreviation there. President Trump has ordered his attorney general to pursue the release of any pertinent grand jury testimony in the case. But Michael, why not do what Senator Hawley suggests, just release everything with redactions to protect the victims in the Epstein case, not just the grand jury stuff. That's the hardest stuff to release. There's a lot more.
That was the position that Donald Trump had when he was running as a candidate.
Yep.
And in fact, that was one of the big motivators of a lot of the people who were out there related to MAGA. Remember, they had this conspiracy that this was all Democrats in this stuff. It's interesting now, almost mind-blowing to watch the news and see now that the Democrats are on the attack about Jeffrey Epstein. Regardless, the president finds himself in a real pickle here because there's clearly something he doesn't want to disclose, and yet another spotlight on. He says one thing and does the exact opposite for his constituents.
Do you agree? Is there something he's hiding?
Obviously. And look, this is one of the largest child sex trafficking rings in the history of the world. This is a historically bad dude, Jeffrey Epstein. And I think the public ought to know who the prominent people were that were involved in it, because there were several. And one of them may have been Donald Trump. But they not releasing it, this story is not going to go away. And I think
no matter what he says.
Yeah, and I don't think politically, with Donald Trump supporters, I don't think this will make much difference for them.
That's interesting because I thought it was a complete miscalculation for him to go out and call the very staunchest supporters fools that bought into a hoax he was pushing.
He's lost a few of the prominent folks, but I don't think the rank and file of his base, I think, stays with him.
You also have the circumstances of Epstein's death, right? I mean, there are questions about that still.
Yeah.
Gaps in the tape.
This is going to be like the Kennedy murders, huh? We're going to deal with it for decades?
It's looking that way, huh?
Right?
Up next, you've heard the saying, when they made him, they broke the mold. It's certainly true of St. Louis political titan, former Congressman Bill Clay, who passed away this week at the age of 94.
To hear more, listen to the podcast. Just search for Hancock and Kelly.
In his youth in the 1940s, he did alterations, sewing, and even janitorial work for a clothing store in downtown St. Louis. After making it through St. Louis University, Bill Clay answered the call of the civil rights movement and then entered politics, becoming Missouri's first black congressman elected in 1968. Congressman Clay died this past week at age 94. More than a dozen years after he retired from Congress, the Poplar Street Bridge in downtown St. Louis was renamed in his honor, and honored he was.
It says that what I did during my lifetime is worth others emulating.
In the summer of 1963, Clay, then an alderman, organized the Jefferson Bank protests. A bank known for serving black customers moved locations and reopened with an all-white staff.
The time has come to recognize the inevitable.
By the time he retired from Congress in 2001, he had served 32 years in the U.S. House as a Democrat representing St. Louis, fighting to raise the minimum wage. He was one of the founders of the Congressional Black Caucus and led the charge sponsoring, then passing the Family and Medical Leave Act, which became law in 1993. His son Lacey, standing behind him here, succeeded him in Congress. Democrat Wesley Bell now holds the seat.
You know, thinking about when he came along in the 60s, the civil rights movement, that was not easy. And the way that he impacted and empowered a generation of leaders is just profound.
He mentored political servants to come, like Missouri State Senator Brian Williams. Clay endorsed him in 2018, though Williams had never held office. Clay's words will never leave him.
I want you to remember what a public servant is. And I said, Congressman, what is that? He said, a public servant is someone who is responsible for the betterment of your community with an endless caseload. He had this courage, his relentless ability to really fight for justice.
I just wanted to leave it open here for your thoughts, guys. Michael?
Well, I mean, everything that you saw in that is true, and the impact that he made on St. Louis. From a political standpoint, I will tell you, few people put together what's called a machine. And Bill Clay and his group created the Clay machine.
Yep.
And that was really powerful and important in St. Louis politics. It was a driving force not only in the state, but in the country. And Bill Clay led that, and we benefited as a result of it.
Speaking of, he was not timid.
No.
You know, he maybe came off that way in that piece.
Yeah.
As a kinder, older man, but not to say he wasn't kind.
Well, he was a bulldog.
He was a force.
He was an absolute force. And I think when you look at his legacy, what is less appreciated by many is how good of a legislator he was. Bill Clay got things done in Washington, D.C., and he was tremendously important for the St. Louis region during those years, bringing in the federal money and getting things done. And you know, his type doesn't exist much in Washington, D.C. anymore. People want to get on the news. They want to fight. Nobody wants to actually pass legislation. That guy did.
It can be done again, though. And Bill Clay wrote the roadmap for it. He wrote a book called Just Permanent Interests. And it's one of the best political lessons I ever learned in my life. He gave me a copy of it. And it tells you, your enemy today may be your friend tomorrow. Find a way to get along. It's all about accomplishing things.
He spent more than 100 days in prison for those protests.
Yeah.
And look where he ended up.
Yeah.
It's a long road to haul, and he did it. Still to come on Hancock and Kelly, Republicans in Congress dropped the budget hammer on Channel 9 in St. Louis. And our quote of the week, Illinois' top legal official calls for ICE agents rounding up those illegally in the U.S. to be demasked. Republicans in Congress passed a $9 billion rescissions bill to eliminate what they call government waste. Most of the cuts are to foreign aid, but more than $1 billion will be cut from public broadcasting, which Republicans have long considered to be a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. The cuts will be felt in St. Louis, where there's little talk of any political slant at our public stations. 9 PBS television reports the bill will mean the loss of $1.8 million, about 13% of its budget. St. Louis NPR, the radio station, reports it will hurt them to the tune of about $575,000, 6.2% of their budget. 85% of Americans, according to PBS, say that PBS provides excellent value. Is this a political winner for Republicans, John?
I think it's popular with the base. I'm a little upset, though, because I'm almost old enough to be able to watch Donnybrook. And I would hate to see that go away. You know, it's a great service to the community.
I'm a fill-in panelist there, and I will leave your insult right where you left it.
I love Donnybrook.
I do too.
I love Donnybrook. Look, the cuts here, it's sad because it ultimately hurts the people that benefited from it the most, and they're the ones who've bought into this idea that it's some left-wing nonsense. It's just not.
Right, especially at the local level. Do you really feel like
yeah, the national NPR
bastion in St.
The
Louis?
National NPR is, I mean, let's be honest, it is left of center. I mean, there's no question about that.
But down the line, they're cutting
the local. Yeah,
it's the nose to spite your face stuff that we constantly see.
Now to our quote of the week. More than 20 Democrat state attorneys general have signed on to a letter to Congress calling for ICE and Border Control agents to be demasked as they round up people illegally in the United States. The letter urges Congress to advance legislation to prohibit federal immigration agents from concealing their identities and require them to show ID when they go about their work. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul is among the signees to a letter that says, quote, "The images of masked armed men and women snatching people from streets are now emblazoned in the public consciousness." Is that right, Michael Kelly? Is America traumatized by what they're seeing?
This is common sense. An officer ought to be disclosing who is. Hey, we're supportive of ICE. I'm supportive of ICE getting the very bad criminals off the street. The problem is even they're ashamed with what they're doing because they're not doing what was promised.
John?
Yeah, you know, I do think the officers ought to be able to show themselves and show identification. Now, I do think that the deportation program that's in place is popular in the country. It's losing some of that popularity in recent weeks, but overall, I think there's pretty broad support for getting illegal aliens out of the country.
Final thoughts are next. First, Drone Fox over the Spirit of Peoria riverboat, a paddle wheeler in St. Louis, a bit downriver from its home dock on the Illinois River, about 200 miles northeast of the Arch. Final thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in politics right now and getting involved. If you're a young person that wants to, Bill Clay is a good model for you to follow.
How about that, John? Yours.
He is. You know, a lot of great statesmen have come from Missouri. I think about Kit Bond, who we just recently lost. Certainly Roy Blunt was a cornerstone in the United States Senate. And to the Clay family, I give my deepest condolences. And Lacy Clay, who I got to know pretty well and I served with in the Missouri General Assembly, he's a great guy as well.
All right. Thank you both, and my condolences to the Clay family as well, too. I got to cover both.
Yeah.
Tail end of my his career, of Mr. Clay's career. Mr. Bill, I should say. Thanks for watching Hancock and Kelly. Remember, if it's Sunday in St. Louis, it's Hancock and Kelly on Fox 2. We'll see you next week.